Along with lost media and internet content, another huge fascination of mine is retro video games. I absolutely love the look and feel of the games that came out before my time. When I was 16, I would go to the swap meet and game stores to collect some of my favorite NES games and Game Boy games. The games that really fascinated me were the ones that were visually impressive or insanely ahead of their time. Games such as Adventure for the Atari 2600, Bubble Bobble, Zelda, or Gauntlet for the NES are all examples of games that were insanely ahead of their time and inspired me heavily. But along my journey, I discovered that there was something very particular about the Game Boy game Faceball 2000. Faceball is a special game that I hold close to my heart. It's easily one of the most technologically impressive games on the original Game Boy. It's a 3D, first-person shooter where you traverse a maze and try to find the exit while dodging enemy faces who run into you and shoot at you. It's a bare-bones simple concept, but just the fact that they were able to get something like this working on a portable console in 1991 is absolutely mind-boggling. The game also features an impressive soundtrack and a really unique style. However, the reason I'm talking about it today has to do with a mythical feature that seemingly wasn't unearthed until a decade after the game's release. Hey, if you have some time and want to support the channel, make sure to check out the Adrian Gasly Etsy shop for some cool stickers. The shop is by far the best way to support the channel and is something I've been really wanting to do for a long time. We have 4 sticker designs right now, but I have loads more ideas in the works. adriangasly.etsy.com, thank you. Now, this game supports multiplayer. 4-player multiplayer at that, which at the time of discovering this, I had no idea was possible on the original Game Boy. How it works is a device like this. This device allows multiple Game Boys to connect to each other via a link cable, with the main one sticking out going into the Game Boy that's hosting the game. This was an accessory that was officially released by Nintendo, and it worked for the most part, but only a handful of games were compatible with this thing, so the odds of a friend around the block having one was probably pretty slim. With that being said though, I can find one and only one video where someone is doing this. But this is no myth, this is common knowledge. The myth is not that 4 players, not 8, but a whopping 16 players can connect to each other with the right set of hardware. A 16-player Game Boy game? How in the world are you supposed to find 16 people that have this game, let alone 16 connector cables to pull this off? Well, I wouldn't underestimate the dedication of this insanely niche community. So the rumor stems from a blog post with an interview from the lead programmer, Robert Champagne. There was no 4-player adapter available yet from Nintendo, and they didn't tell us it was coming. We wanted more than 2 people to be able to play this game simultaneously, so looking at the hardware specification and came up with a simple way to connect as many Game Boys as we wanted, essentially a daisy chain of systems. I built a connector and wrote some code, and couldn't believe how well it worked. Developing a special Y-shaped link cable that daisy-chained multiple Game Boys together seemed to be successful. It is also explained that they wanted to package this special link cable with the game, but Nintendo stepped in and wanted them to use their 4-player adapter that they were currently developing. However, the rumor stems from the fact that Champagne goes on to explain that support for 16 players is still in the code, so theoretically it would be possible to still have a mythical 16-player game. With the right set of equipment, of course. And with that, people started experimenting. At first, people tried buying 7 4-player adapters and 14 link cables, all connecting Game Boys into one congealed mass. This was brought up on tons of forum threads over the years, but from my understanding never worked in practice. Imagine having 16 people playing around the same room and having to be close because of the cable length. That's why it's called Faceball. With 16 players, your face is in someone else's balls. Now, testing something like this was insanely hard to pull off, since it requires tons of hardware that was decades old at this point, and having friends that also wanted to play proved hard to find. But that didn't stop a few really dedicated people. Enter Uncle Bob. Now, for a few decades, Uncle Bob was extremely dedicated, making the 16-player game a reality. He posted about this many times on the Nintendo World Report forums and attempted many times to make a 16-player game working. He compiled the lot of it in this Reddit post that was posted on September 5th, 2022. He laid out exactly what he's been up to. Now, this post shows off his trials and tribulations of what he went through in order to, sort of, pull off what people thought was originally impossible. He posted these two pictures, one of his crazy mad science experiment, and the other of a Game Boy screen showing 14 players all connected simultaneously. Now, it wasn't 16, but 14 is still an incredible feat to pull off when it was originally thought to be impossible without developing a cable from scratch. Now, he explains how it was all done in this lengthy post. A lot of it proved to be really complex, so after reading it multiple times, I'm gonna try to explain it as best as I can with visuals. So, Uncle Bob quickly realized that using the 4-player adapter that works with the original Game Boy was not going to work. But he remembered that there was a similar cable device for the Game Boy Advance. This device more closely resembled the original Y-shaped cable that Champagne initially talked about in his interview from 2005. However, there was one problem. The GBA link cable isn't backwards compatible, only works with GBA games, and not original Game Boy games. But somehow, after what I assumed was a lifetime of testing, Uncle Bob figured out that you can make backwards compatibility work by stringing the GBA link cable into a loop, and then connecting the end bits into Game Boys. So he tried this with 4 and then 5 different Game Boy Advances, making the loop bigger and bigger each time, and it worked. He eventually linked up with Cheap Ass Gamer, who hooked him up with a custom link cable so he could connect Game Boys, Game Boy Colors, Game Boy Pockets, and Game Boy Advances all into the same loop, eventually making a game of 11 or 12. His goal was to go to Portland Retro Game Expo with the purpose of making a full 16-player game of Faceball a reality. So, come October 15, 2022, Uncle Bob, the YouTuber Stops Skeletons from Fighting, and many others come to the Portland Retro Game Expo and try to hook up a record-breaking 16-player game of Faceball. However, it was a bust. Apparently, there were two main issues. Number one, the higher you go in terms of players, the more likely you were to crash because the link cables couldn't handle it. And two, there was a software bug in the game itself. Apparently, it was impossible to spawn with 16 players all connected. It could support 15, but 16 for whatever reason just didn't work. This eventually led to January 14th, 2024. On the Video Game Sage forums, it finally happened. 16 players, all playing simultaneously in one Faceball 2000 match. The user Koifish posted an amazing summary of how it all happened. In terms of fixing the issues, Koifish explains, Alex, who built a more effective link cable harness and solving the programming bug, and Zarithia, who implemented the fixes, built and tested / improved the link harness, and created the final patched ROM. This ROM fix would be known as Faceball 2000 DX. Using all of these neat tricks, they were able to play Faceball 2000 as the creators intended. Overall, I found this story really inspiring. The amount of endurance, dedication, creativity that this community has in order to pull this off is truly fascinating. It's incredible how a group of passionate fans, driven by curiosity and a love for retro gaming, were able to achieve something that seemed impossible decades ago. The challenge both honored the original developer's vision and demonstrates how important it is to keep these amazing games alive. If you have a chance, make sure to check out the Etsy shop. I'll have a link down below. Thank you.